Steady on, Mapleshade! You just trod on my toe! The Wind Clan warrior jerked away with a hiss. Oh, sorry, Swiftflight. Mapleshade apologized over her shoulder as she plunged deeper into the throng of cats. The light of the full moon turned all of their pelts to silver, and fur tickled Mapleshade's nose. Above her, Oakstar's voice echoed around the trunks of the 4 gigantic oak trees. My warriors tracked the adders to their nests at Snake Rocks and blocked the holes with stones, the ThunderClan leader reported. Thanks to their courage, no adders have since been seen in our territory.
They were lucky to not get bitten, grunted a ShadowClan elder near Mapleshade's ear.
Too right, agreed her clanmate. Remember when Marshpaw trot at an adder on his first patrol? Ugh, that was a bad way to die. The first cat shrugged.
I've seen worse.
Mapleshade rolled her eyes. Trust ShadowClan cats to get competitive about deaths they've watched. She dodged around a rock and emerged among a cluster of RiverClan cats. Instantly, pelts bristled and she felt eyes burn into her. There may be a truce, but don't push your luck, ThunderClan mouse dung, snarled the Black Warrior Rainfall. Mapleshade ducked her head. I mean no harm, she meowed. I'm not staying. Good, growled the cat she couldn't see. Mapleshade forced her fur to lay flat as she wove among the hostile warriors. She couldn't blame RiverClan for being angry. ThunderClan had triumphed in the last clash over Sunny Rocks, and defeat was the bitterest wound of all. Remember what happened to Birchface and poor little Flowerpaw? Rainfall murmured in her ear, so close that Mapleshade could feel the heat of his fish breath. Those rocks belong to us. We'll kill as many of your clanmates as we need to, until you give them up. Mapleshade stumbled as a memory seared through her brain. It was Appledusk, a light brown RiverClan warrior with piercing green eyes, striking Birchface so hard that the ThunderClan cat lost his footing and slipped from the very top of Sunning Rocks. He had landed with a splash in the swollen river. His apprentice Flowerpaw leaped in after him and struggled to keep Birchface's head out of the water. But the current was too strong, and they were swept downstream into the half-submerged crossing rocks. For one terrible moment, dark tabby and dappled greyheads rose above the surface, screeching in fear. Then both vanished into the tumbling foam. Their bodies were found just beyond the stones, washed up on the ThunderClan shore as if they were trying to make a last desperate effort to go home. Mapleshade swallowed a burst of rage at the warriors around her. Why did RiverClan insist on fighting over a bunch of rocks that were clearly on ThunderClan's territory? She lowered her head and pushed her way through the knot of hostile cats. She made it to the edge of the hollow where the shadows clustered more densely, dark enough to hide among. Suddenly, a pale brown shape loomed in front of her, and Mapleshade's nostrils flared at the scent of fish. She looked up, her heart pounding. What are you doing here? Hissed Appledusk. His long front claws caught in the moonlight, and he sank them into the grass. Mapleshade's words seemed to be stuck in her throat. She stared into the RiverClan warrior's holly-colored eyes and tried to breathe normally. She wondered if any of her clanmates were watching. Appledusk took a step closer and lowered his head until his muzzle brushed the tip of Mapleshade's ear. You must know how dangerous it is for you to be here. What would happen if your clanmates saw you talking to me? Mapleshade leaned forward until her cheek pressed against Appledusk's feather-soft chest fur. I had to speak with you, she murmured. It's been too long. I waited for you at the sycamore tree every night, but you never came. The Tom's breath warmed the back of her neck. I know, he purred. But since the battle, we've doubled our border patrols, even after dark. I can't cross the river without being spotted. He took a step back and Mapleshade felt a rush of cool air on her pelt. I'll try to get across at the new moon. Things might calm down by then. If only you hadn't killed Birchface, Mapleshade whispered. Of all the cats to lose in a battle, it had to be Oakstar's son. She felt Appledusk stiffen beneath his pelt. It was an accident, he growled. I never meant for him to fall into the river. Mapleshade closed her eyes. That's not the way my clanmates see it. They blame you for both of our losses. Well, then they're fools. Appledusk shuddered. and then relaxed. But stunning rocks has always made our clans a little mouse-brained. He licked the top of Mapleshade's head. I thank StarClan that you didn't get hurt in the battle. Mapleshade gazed up at him. Oh, my precious warrior. I love you with all my heart. There's something that you need to know, she meowed. Appledusk was looking over her head, towards the pool of moonlight where his clanmates stood. Can't it wait? Oh, I don't think so. Mapleshade took a deep breath. I'm expecting your kids! There was a flash of green as Appledusk opened his eyes wide. Are you sure? Mapleshade nodded. The RiverClan warrior curled his tail over his back. I'm gonna be a father! Huh, he purred. Incredible! Then he tipped his head to one side. But, these kids will be half clan, and half RiverClan at that. How will your clanmates feel about that? They won't know, Mapleshade answered. She noticed Appledusk flinch. Well, at least not at first, she went on. I will raise them as ThunderClan until they've been fully accepted. Then every cat will be able to cope with the truth. Why should it matter that their father lives in a different clan? The fur on Appledusk's shoulders twitched. You've got great faith in your clanmates, he murmured. No, I have faith in StarClan, and in the warrior code. You think StarClan approves of what we're doing? Appledusk narrowed his eyes. I think that our warrior ancestors know that our clans need kits. And we're providing them. How can our innocent kids not have their blessing? They will grow up to be fine warriors, loyal to ThunderClan and RiverClan equally. Mapleshade turned away before Appledusk could say anything else. I must return to my clanmates before they come looking for me. Perhaps it's best that we don't see each other again until after the kids have come. She looked back over her shoulder. But I'll be thinking of you every day, my love. As she padded into the shadows that ringed the hollow, Mapleshade heard rapid paw steps. Oh, Appledusk! There you are! I've been looking for you! Mapleshade stopped, hoping that her white patches weren't glowing in the moonlight. A dark orange she-cat was pressing herself against Appledusk's shoulder. One of the ShadowClan elders is telling a story about a cat that swallowed a live frog, she mewed. Come and listen! It's really funny. With a worried glance at the shadows where Mapleshade crouched, Appledusk followed the she-cat back to the cluster of cats. The orange warrior curled her tail until it was resting on Appledusk's back. Mapleshade curled up her lip. Stay away from him, Reedshine. He's mine, and these kits will make sure of that.
Mapleshade, wake up!
A small ginger face poked through the branches that sheltered the warrior's den.
Beatel wants you to go on the dawn patrol. You're late.
All right, Nettlepaw, I'm coming. Mapleshade heaved herself to her paws. Last night, she had felt the kits stirring inside her for the first time. Is it because your father knows about you now? She craned her head around to lick the rumpled fur on her flank, and then she pushed her way out of the den. She felt strangely heavy and unbalanced by her swollen belly. The air in the clearing was still and cold, tasting of old leaves and damp earth. The little orange apprentice bounced around Mapleshade.
Hurry up! When did you get so slow?
Mapleshade flicked him lightly with her tail. What would Dear Dapple do if you spoke like that to her, Nettlepaw looked down at the ground at the mention of his mentor.
She'd probably make me pick ticks off rabbit fur for a moon. Ugh,
he admitted. Mapleshade purred, too full of joy about her kits to be short-tempered. You're lucky that I won't punish you then. Now off you go. Let me speak to Beatel. The apprentice scampered off with a squeak. Mapleshade headed over to the ThunderClan deputy, who was standing beside the entrance to Oakstar's den. The dark brown tabby nodded as Mapleshade approached. I'd like you to join the Dawn Patrol, please, he meowed. Frecklewish is leading it. Actually, there's something that I need to tell you, Mapleshade began. Her paws tingled. I won't be able to carry out my usual duties for a while, because I'm expecting kits. Beatel blinked. Oh, right. I, wasn't expecting that. Well, you must only do what you feel up to. Does Oakstar know? Not yet. Why don't I help around in camp today? Mapleshade suggested. She couldn't resist glancing at the curve of her belly. I could fetch some soaked moss for the elders if you like. That would be great. Yeah, Beetle. He shifted his paws. And, congratulations. Thank you, purred Mapleshade. It's wonderful news, isn't it? Indeed. Beetle meowed. And these kids, their father? I will be raising them alone, Mapleshade answered firmly. The deputy looked startled for a moment. Then he dipped his head. May StarClan light your path. And the path of your kits, of course. Still rumbling with delight, Mapleshade turned and headed back across the clearing. Since she wasn't needed on the dawn patrol, she could go back to her nest and rest until the rest of the clan had stirred. She knew she had to save her strength for when the kits arrived. Mapleshade was dozing in the dappled sunlight when she was roused by paws thrumming outside the den. Frecklewish, of all cats, burst in, her speckled golden fur fluffed up and her eyes sparkling. Oh, Beetle told me your news, she purred. I am so happy for you. Mapleshade sat up and curled her thick white tail over her paws. Oh, thank you. You see, Appledusk? My clanmates will only be delighted to have new kits in camp. Frecklewish stood beside Mapleshade's nest looking uncharacteristically shy. Beetle also said that you would be raising these kits alone? She meowed. Mapleshade tensed. She had not anticipated questions about her kit's father so soon. Frecklewish looked down at the floor of the den. Is that because their father is dead? She lifted her gaze, and Mapleshade almost winced at the blaze of hope in her eyes. Are these Birchface's kits? Is my brother going to live on through you? The air in the warrior's den was suddenly so thick that Mapleshade couldn't catch her breath. Is this StarClan offering me a way for my kits to be accepted by their clanmates? I can't lie. Not if I want them to know the truth later. She stared at Frecklewish, unable to speak. The golden she-cat didn't seem to need a response from Mapleshade. She nodded slowly, and the light in her eyes burned even more brightly. I'm right, aren't I? Oh, thanks, StarClan! And thank you, Mapleshade! You'll never know how much this means to me. I thought I would never be happy again after Birchface was killed in that terrible battle. But now, I can help you raise his kids! And teach them that their father was a true ThunderClan hero! And watch them take his place in the clan. She broke off and stepped gently into the nest until she was crouched beside Mapleshade. She stretched out her front paw and rested it on Mapleshade's orange and white flank. I hope Birchface can see us, she murmured. Mapleshade took a deep breath. I have not lied out loud. This was all Frecklewish's doing. But I cannot turn down the chance to have my kits welcomed with the love that they deserve. Appledusk will understand that I have to put ThunderClan first. For now, at least. She unfurled her tail until it was resting on Frecklewish's shoulder. You have answered my prayers, Frecklewish, she mewed softly. My kits and I are no longer alone. Frecklewish's dark amber gaze shone back at her. No, never, she vowed. These kits will be the best thing to ever happen to our clan. Oh, StarClan, make it stop. Mapleshade writhed in agony and sank her claws into the dried moss. Relax, Ravenwing instructed, placing one paw on her rippling flank. You try to relax with this happening to you. Mapleshade wanted to screech at the medicine cat, but she barely had enough breath to survive the spasm that racked her body. She clenched her jaw and resisted the urge to sink her teeth into Ravenwing's thick, furred black leg. Oh, it's a Tom! Gasped Frecklewish. Aw, he's magnificent! Ravenwing turned to look. Mapleshade sprawled in the nest with her eyes closed, trying not to think about the pain yet to come. Something wet and squirming was shoved against her muzzle. She opened her mouth to protest, and she smelled the sweetest scent she'd ever known. She lifted her head and blinked down at the dark brown bundle of slick fur beside her. Oh, Appledusk, you have a son, and he's beautiful. Lick him, Mapleshade, Ravenwing mewed. It'll help him breathe. For a moment, Mapleshade wanted to tell the other cats to get out, to leave her alone with this tiny, precious creature. Nothing would ever be as special as this heartbeat when she met her first kit. Then, her body buckled under another wave of pain and she cried out. Ravenwing hastily pulled the kid away.
You take him, Frecklewish,
he ordered.
Oh, gladly,
came the she-cat's mew.
Come here, little one. Let's get you clean and dry.
Mapleshade tried to say that she could take care of her own kits, but the spasm grew stronger, and suddenly there was another kit laying beside her. His mouth open wide in a soundless mew, his fur patched with ginger and white like his mother's.
Another Tom,
Ravenwing announced.
You're doing great, Mapleshade.
He ran his paws along her body.
One more, and that's it. Come on now, stay focused.
An irresistible longing to be alone with her kits gave Mapleshade a fresh surge of strength, and the final kit slithered out almost at once.
A she-cat, purred Ravenwing. Smaller than her brothers, but in excellent shape. Your turn to take over, Mapleshade.
He nudged all 3 kits into the curve of Mapleshade's belly. She propped herself up and twisted around to gaze at them in astonishment. I did it, Apple Dusk. 2 sons and a daughter. Oh, they're gorgeous, Frecklewish whispered, her voice husky with emotion.
Ravenwing nodded. You did a good job, Mapleshade. We'll leave you to rest, but I'll come back with some herbs for you after Sunhigh. Do you feel okay?
I couldn't be better, she told him. Her throat felt dry and sore. Could I just have some water, please?
I'll fetch it,
Frecklewish offered, hopping out of the nest and vanishing through the brambles. Ravenwing watched her leave.
You've made her feel as though life is worth living again, he commented. She took the loss of her brother hard.
Mapleshade buried her muzzle into the soft, damp fur of her kits. These kits are my gift to the whole of ThunderClan, she murmured, and I will thank StarClan for them every day for the rest of my life. The medicine cat touched her lightly with the tip of his tail.
And ThunderClan thanks you,
he meowed. As will RiverClan, Mapleshade added silently. The feud over Sunning Rocks will be forgotten when the clans realize that they share these perfect warriors.
Are you receiving visitors?
Rumbled a voice at the entrance of the nursery. Oh, of course. Come in. Mapleshade meowed somewhat breathlessly as she tried to coax the she-kit off the top of her head. At just 3 sunrises old, Mapleshade's kits astonished her with their ability to be all over the nursery at once, while at the same time constantly nuzzling at her belly. Oakstar's broad, dark brown face appeared through the branches.
Hello, little ones, he purred.
The she-kit jumped at the sound of his voice. Releasing her tiny claws from Mapleshade's ear, she slithered onto the moss with a thump. This is Oakstar, the leader of ThunderClan, Mapleshade told her kits. She tried to nudge them into line, but their eyes were still closed and the smell of a different cat was just too much to resist. So all 3 tottered towards Oakstar, with their stubby tails held straight up, their mouths open in high-pitched mews. Oakstar gently herded them back to Mapleshade with his paw.
Haha, I'm not just their leader, he reminded her. Birchface was my son. These cats are my kin.
His eyes clouded with emotion as he stared down at the kits.
If only Birchface could see them.
Mapleshade's fur felt hot and prickly. I'm sure he's watching from StarClan, she murmured. Beside her, the kits started nuzzling at her belly and fell silent as they began to suck.
My son was a great warrior, Oakstar went on. The clan is honored if his spirit lives on through his kits.
There was a rustle of bramble fronds and Frecklewish appeared with a vole in her jaws. She sat it down beside the nest. I took the first pick of the fresh kill pile for you, she told Mapleshade with pride. Oh, thank you, Mapleshade meowed hoarsely. She wondered if it would be rude to ask Oakstar to leave, as his scrutiny was making her more and more nervous. Frecklewish turned to Oakstar. Aren't the kids perfect? She purred. I can see Birchface so clearly in each of them. Mapleshade glanced at the tiny bodies in the curve of her belly. Apart from the Tom who was patch-furred like her, they were the exact soft brown shade of Appledusk's fur. Birchface had been a dark brown tabby, almost black. Her heart pounding, she waited for Oakstar to comment, but instead, he asked if she'd chosen names for them. Mapleshade used her tail to indicate to each kit without disturbing them. Well, I thought Larch Kit for the brown Tom, Patch Kit for his brother, and Petal Kit for their sister. She paused as her tail tip rested on the tiny she-kit. She was the fluffiest of all, and her ears were so small that they barely peeked out of the fur on her head. Mapleshade felt as though her heart would burst with love. If only you could see them like this, Appledusk.
Excellent names!
Oakstar meowed. Didn't you want to name one of them after Birchface? Frecklewish asked. She sounded disappointed. Mapleshade didn't lift her gaze from her kits. I want them to each be their own warrior, she explained quietly, not an echo of a cat who has gone before. To her relief, Oakstar purred.
Oh, ThunderClan is blessed to have you as a queen, Mapleshade. I look forward to watching these kids grow up.
I can't wait to see the looks on RiverClan's faces when they hear about them at the next gathering, Frecklewish hissed. Mapleshade's heart began to beat faster. I wish I could be there to see that too. Make sure you tell them that I've had 3 perfect strong kids who are going to be great warriors, she told Frecklewish. Especially Appledusk. Tell him first. The pale ginger she-cat blinked. And why would I want to speak to that mange fur? She growled. He killed Birchface. Exactly, yawned Mapleshade hurriedly. He needs to know that ThunderClan is stronger than ever. Thanks to these kids. Frecklewish nodded. Oh, of course. She unsheathed her front claws and sank them into the mossy litter on the floor of the nursery. Our enemies have even more of a reason to fear us now. Oakstar curled his lip, showing a glint of yellow teeth.
It will do no harm for RiverClan to know that they may have robbed us of 2 fine cats. But, thanks to Birchface, there will be 3 more warriors ready to defend what's rightfully ours.
Mapleshade felt a stir of alarm. The warrior code says we must show mercy to the warriors we've defeated, she pointed out. Appledusk didn't show any mercy to Birchface and Flowerpaw, Frecklewish hissed, lashing her tail. It was an accident! Mapleshade wanted to shriek. Birchface just fell. And Flowerpaw. She should have never followed him into the river. But Mapleshade controlled herself.
Oakstar was starting to back out of the nursery. Right now, the most important thing is that Mapleshade's kits are safe and well,
he meowed. There was a grim note to his voice that made Mapleshade's fur stand up.
We will raise them to be great warriors like their father,
Oakstar vowed,
and let them avenge his death when they're ready.
He turned and vanished into the clearing, leaving the bramble wall trembling. Frecklewish bent over the furry little bodies and touched her muzzle lightly to each squirming rump. They are my brother's gift to the clan, she murmured. And the most precious creatures in the whole forest. Mapleshade fought down the urge to bat Frecklewish away. These are my kits, not yours. She knew that the Ginger She-Cat's friendship would go a long way towards her kits being loved by all of ThunderClan. By the time her kits were ready to be apprenticed, the truth about who their father really was would be unable to shake the loyalty of their woodland clanmates. Even Oakstar would understand. Once he valued the kits for themselves, rather than any legacy they might carry. And once RiverClan gets to know them, those cats will feel the same.
What's this, Lurch Kit?
Wrinkling her muzzle in concentration, Petal Kit gripped the bundle of dry moss in her jaws and shook it violently. Her brother grabbed the moss from her and tossed it across the clearing. Both kits scrambled after it, Petal Kit winning by a nose. She flopped down on top of the moss.
Mine!
She declared. Don't you want to join in? Mapleshade asked Patch Kit, who was lying in the curve of her belly. His fur matched hers so perfectly that it was impossible to tell where one stopped and the other began. It looks like they're having fun. Her son shook his head.
I'm fine here,
he mewed. He snuggled in a little closer.
You need me to keep you warm, don't you?
His green eyes blinked anxiously at her. Mapleshade stifled a purr of laughter. She could barely feel his tiny body against hers. It was a rare, cloud-free day in rain-washed leaf fall, and the sunbeams were just strong enough to bring cats out of their dens to bask. Though there was a chill in the ground that warmed of leaf bare just around the corner. Ah, yes, you're doing a great job, she told Patch Kit. I might have to share you with the elders to stop them from getting cold.
Patch Kit's green eyes opened wide with alarm. No! I want to stay with you! forever and ever, even when I'm an apprentice.
Mapleshade nuzzled the top of his head. That won't be for another 4 moons, little one. Then you'll be so big and strong you'll be glad to leave the nursery and start your warrior training.
No, I won't,
muttered Patchkit, burying his face in her chest fur.
I never want to leave you.
Petalkit and Larchkit were standing side by side looking at the moss.
You've ripped it to pieces.
Larchkit protested.
It doesn't roll away now, look.
He prodded the pile of dusty brown shreds with his paw. Petalkit shrugged.
It was trying to escape and I caught it.
One of the elders, a gray tabby named Rabbitfur, padded stiffly over to the kits.
Looks like she killed it,
he observed.
Want to play a different game?
Yes, please,
yelled Larchkit. Rabbitfur used his front paw to roll a small stone into the middle of the clearing. Then he nudged a twig with his nose, until it lay a little bit less than a fox length from the stone. Mapleshade propped herself up to watch.
I want you to stand by this stick,
Rabbitfur meowed, pointing at it with his tail.
and pounce on that stone without touching the ground in between.
Petalkit blinked.
but that's almost on the other side of the clearing. I'd have to grow wings to jump that far.
Yelled Larchkit.
Don't be mouse-brained,
Snorted Rabbitfur.
Your father could leap twice that distance and land on the smallest leaf without disturbing a fly.
Mapleshade felt a stir of alarm in her belly. Beside her, Patchkit sat up and tipped his head to one side.
Rabbitfur's really bossy,
he squeaked. Petalkit was crouching down beside the twig, wriggling her rump as she braced herself for a jump. With a grunt, she heaved herself forward, but her hind paw caught on the stick. She lurched sideways, snapping the twig, and sprawled onto the ground at Rabbitfur's paws. He muttered.
Try again.
This time, Petalkit managed to clear the stick, but she barely made half the distance to the stone. Rabbitfur shook his head.
Your turn, Larchkit,
he rumbled. The little brown Tom looked very determined as he hunkered down. He sprang into the air almost as high as Rabbitfur's ears, but he came down almost vertically, like an acorn falling from a tree. Rabbitfur had to dodge out of the way to avoid being squashed.
Watch out!
He gave his chest fur a couple of licks.
Birchface could manage pouncing without flattening any cats, he growled.
Mapleshade could not listen to any more. She jumped out, dislodging Patchkit, who rolled over with a squawk, and she trotted into the clearing. Perhaps they take after me, Rabbitfur. I can't pounce either. The old Tom narrowed his eyes.
But you're not that bad. I can't believe that any kid of Birchface would be as heavy-footed as a badger.
He glanced at Petalkit, who was licking the paw that had been caught on the stick. The blood was roaring in Mapleshade's ears now. I will not have my kits be judged before they've even begun their warrior training, she hissed. Patchkit, come here. We're going for a walk in the forest. Patchkit scampered over to her, but Petalkit was pouting.
I want to stay here and practice jumping, she meowed. I want to be as good as Birchface.
Rabbitfur looked pleased.
You should be proud of who your father was, he purred. I remember the time we were stalking a pheasant over by 2 Lake Place. I'd never seen a bird that big. The Birchface was fearless and so quiet. I could not hear him over the breeze in the leaves.
I think the kids need to stretch their legs outside the camp. Mapleshade meowed, interrupting Rabbitfur's memories. Come on, you 3. No arguments, Petalkit. Patchkit's green eyes that looked so much like apple dusks that they made Mapleshade's heart flip over were huge.
Are we allowed outside? I thought we had to stay in camp until we were old enough to be apprentices.
Oh, well, I'll be with you, so you'll be perfectly safe, Mapleshade told him. Oakstar and Beetle were out on patrol, and Frecklewish had gone to check the barrier for stones at Snake Rocks. Rabbitfur had wandered back to his sunny spot outside the Elder's Den. Apart from some dozing cats, the clearing was empty. No cat would take much notice if she took the kits out. Suddenly, Mapleshade could not bear to be in the ravine another moment. With a whisk of her tail, she trotted towards the tunnel through the gorse. The kits bundled after her, chirping with excitement.
I'm gonna catch a badger,
Larchkit boasted.
Yeah, and I'm gonna watch that badger eat you first,
retorted Petalkit. Patchkit was running at Mapleshade's heels.
Oh, don't let a badger eat me.
Mapleshade paused beside the tunnel entrance and turned to lick Patchkit's ears. I'll never let anything bad happen to you, she promised. With one more glance to check that they weren't being scrutinized, she ushered her kits into the branches.
Ouch! It's prickly!
Squeaked Petal Kit. Don't stop, Mapleshade urged. And with a rapid beat of paws on hard earth, the kits burst out of the tunnel and stopped dead, staring around.
Wow! Outside the camp's really big!
Breathed Large Kit. Yes, and it's even bigger at the top of the ravine. Mapleshade meowed. She nudged her kits towards the path that led to the trees. Her fur prickled at the thought of being seen by a returning patrol. The kits scrambled up the slope, Petal Kit in the lead. They looked even tinier among the tree trunks, the towering oaks and beeches that overhung the ravine. Mapleshade hurried them along a little-used path beneath the dense ferns. The kits wanted to stop and sniff every leaf and every mark on the ground, but Mapleshade kept them moving, ducking beneath the sweet-smelling fronds and hoping that the fern scent would cover their tracks. As the undergrowth began to thin out, the sound of splashing water drifted through the trees. Large Kit pricked his ears.
What's that?
He meowed. As he tried to peer through the stalks, he stumbled over a fallen twig and landed on his nose. Mapleshade whisked him back to his paws before he could let out a wail. I'm glad Rabbit Fur didn't see that, she thought. She could not deny that these kits were clumsier than their ThunderClan kin. Patch Kit had kept going while Mapleshade picked up his brother, and Mapleshade suddenly heard a squeak of surprise.
Water! Water everywhere! Look!
His littermates bundled forward to stand beside him at the edge of the bracken. Mapleshade joined them and looked out at the dazzling brightness of the river as it flowed past, swift and sparkling.
It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen!
Petal Kit whispered.
Where did it come from?
Meowed Larch Kit. Mapleshade thought for a moment. I really don't know, she admitted. Farther upstream is a deep gorge beside WindClan's territory.
Can we go there?
Petal Kit demanded. Mapleshade shook her head. No, little one, it's too far for you to walk today. But one day you'll see it, I promise. Patch Kit, who was usually so timid and happy to let his littermates try everything first, tottered over the stones to the edge of the water. Be careful, Mapleshade warned. Her son turned to look at her, his eyes shining and droplets of water glinting on his whiskers.
It's okay,
he meowed.
Watch me!
Before Mapleshade could stop him, he launched himself forward and slipped into the water. For one heart-stopping moment, he vanished. Then his ginger and white face bobbed up to the surface.
Look at me!
He squealed. Large Kit and Petal Kit raced down to the shore and plunged in. For a few strides, their little paws dug into the pebbles while the fur lapped at their fluffy bellies. And then they were swimming through the rolling water. Mapleshade felt a burst of love like the sun coming out. Oh, Apple Dusk, our kits are half RiverClan for sure. Patch Kit reached a branch sticking out of the water and hauled himself onto it. Water streamed from his pelt, leaving it as glossy as crow's feathers. He looked no bigger than a mouse with his fur flattened to his sides, and his flanks heaved as he caught his breath. Mapleshade felt a jolt of concern. Are you okay? She called. Patch Kit nodded, still panting too hard to speak. Mapleshade paced up and down the shore. She hated the idea of getting her paws wet, but she wasn't sure if Patch Kit had enough strength to swim back on his own. The other kits were playing hide-and-seek in a clump of reeds close by the shore. Large Kit! Petal Kit! Go help your brother! She meowed. Suddenly, the rushes on the far shore rustled and a dark gray head appeared. Mapleshade froze. It was Spiketail, the RiverClan deputy. In the middle of the river, Patch Kit slumped on the branch, his cheek resting on the slick bark.
What is that kit doing?
Growled Spiketail. He stepped onto the shore, the fur along his spine bristling. Mapleshade opened her mouth to speak, but two more warriors were emerging from the rushes beside Spiketail. Is ThunderClan sending their youngest cats to invade us? Asked Milkfur, her white pelt glowing against the stones. The third cat met Mapleshade's gaze across the river. From this distance, his green eyes were unreadable.
I'll return him to where he belongs.
He waded into the water, his pale brown fur turning black as he slid beneath the surface. Larch Kit, Petal Kit, come here, Mapleshade hissed. The kits waded towards her, looking scared.
Is that RiverClan warrior going to catch us?
Petal Kit squeaked. Mapleshade watched Appledusk's head bob steadily closer to the branch. No, she meowed. You're safe, don't worry. Appledusk mewed something to Patch Kit, too quietly for Mapleshade to hear. Patch Kit slithered down the branch and into the water.
The RiverClan warriors steadied him with one paw and then began to propel him towards the ThunderClan shore. Mapleshade realized that the other kits were trembling from cold, and she bent her head to lick their fur.
Are we in trouble?
Large Kit mewed. Hush, everything is fine, Mapleshade murmured between licks. Appledusk waded out of the river, with Patch Kit dangling from his jaws. He set the kit down on the stones and nudged him to his feet.
I think this one's worn out from all the swimming,
he commented. His eyes burned into Mapleshade's.
You took a risk bringing them this close to our boundary.
I wanted to show them the river, Mapleshade meowed. She angled her body so that the kits were bundled behind her, out of earshot. She could hear Large Kit asking Patch Kit what it had been like to swim so far out. Appledusk leaned forward until his muzzle was almost touching Mapleshade's cheek.
They're wonderful, he breathed, strong and brave, and as confident as any RiverClan cat in the water. I'm so proud of you.
He straightened up and raised his voice.
And I don't want to see you and these kits anywhere near the river again,
he meowed, but the longing in his eyes told a different story. Mapleshade bowed her head. Oh, of course, Appledusk. Thank you for bringing Patch Kit back. Appledusk glanced once more at the kits and then headed back into the water. Those kids are not old enough to be outside the nursery, Milkfur called across the river. What were you thinking of bringing them here? They could have drowned.
You may have won, Sunning Rocks, but the river still belongs to us,
yelled Spiketail.
Appledusk has been merciful this time, but from now on, stay away from our territory.
Mapleshade herded the kits into the bracken. They were bouncing on their paws, even Patch Kit, whose fur was fluffing up like a thistledown as it dried.
That was the best thing ever,
squeaked Large Kit.
When can we come here again?
Petal Kit asked.
Swimming is way more fun than jumping. I swam the furthest, didn't I?
Meowed Patch Kit proudly. Suddenly, a dark shape blocked the path. Mapleshade looked up and met Ravenwing's searching blue gaze. The medicine cat glanced down at the kits.
What were they doing in the river? What were they doing in the river?
He asked. Mapleshade's paws started to tingle. Did you see them? She whispered.
Ravenwing nodded. I saw everything. What's going on, Mapleshade?
Before Mapleshade could reply, the kits tumbled over themselves to tell him about their adventure.
A RiverClan warrior had to save Patch Kit,
meowed Large Kit.
He did not. I was just resting,
Patch Kit interrupted crossly. It was fine. No one was in any danger, Mapleshade meowed, as Ravenwing narrowed his eyes.
The RiverClan cat was really nice,
squealed Patch Kit.
He said I was very brave and a really good swimmer.
Huh. Did he?
meowed Ravenwing.
What else did he say?
Ravenwing took a step closer. Mapleshade curled her tail around her kits. Come on, little ones. It's time to get home. But Ravenwing didn't move out of the way.
I've seen an omen, Mapleshade, he murmured. I wonder if you know anything about it.
There was something in his voice that made Mapleshade's fur prick. Why would I know anything about an omen? I'm not a medicine cat. Ravenwing stared at her without blinking.
A tiny stream appeared in my den, in a place where no stream has run before. It carried with it 3 pieces of water reed.
He swept over the ground as if he was tracing the path of the rivulet.
Water reed doesn't grow in ThunderClan territory. It doesn't belong inside our boundaries. Do you understand?
Mapleshade shrugged. Oh, there's been so much rain this leaf fall. Bits and pieces must be washing all over the place. She tried to keep her voice light, but there was a cold and heavy feeling in her belly, as if she had swallowed a stone from the river. Ravenwing watched the kits play with an acorn, shuffling it from one to the other with their paws.
I think that this omen means that the river has washed 3 strange cats into ThunderClan. 3 cats who don't belong here.
Mapleshade's heart was pounding so hard that she could barely breathe. What are you trying to say? she whispered. Ravenwing gazed at her, and suddenly he didn't seem like a young, inexperienced cat anymore. Knowledge glittered in his eyes like frosty stars. Birchface is not the father of these kits, is he? Rabbit Fur told me what happened today, how they showed no signs of being able to stalk or pounce like him. And don't tell me that they take after you instead, he added, cutting Mapleshade off as she opened her mouth. You tread as lightly as any ThunderClan warrior. He looked past her, at the river splashing beyond the shades of the trees. I watched your kids swim in that river, as if they were fish. Yes, I think these cats were fathered by a RiverClan cat. Apple Dusk, I guess. Judging by the color of their fur, and by the way that he spoke to them when he brought Patch Kit back. Mapleshade felt the ground sway beneath her paws. ThunderClan is blessed to have 3 beautiful, strong kits, she hissed. The truth will be revealed at the right time. It's not my fault that everyone assumed Birchface was their father. I cannot let you lie to our clanmates, Ravenwing spat. And now that I know the truth, I cannot lie either. I have told you nothing. Mapleshade meowed through clenched jaws. You have told me plenty, Ravenwing responded, and there was sadness in his sky-colored eyes. The truth must come out. Please, don't say anything, Mapleshade begged. These are ThunderClan's kits. They are half RiverClan, Ravenwing corrected, his voice as hard as ice. Our clanmates deserve to know. I'm sorry, Mapleshade. Sorry for you, but even sorrier for these kits. They will end up suffering for the lies you've told. Ravenwing whirled around and vanished into the bracken. Mapleshade stared after him. StarClan, help me! For a moment, she considered taking her kits and running deeper into the forest, hiding her kits away from any cat who might harm them. But then, she looked at Petalkit, balancing an acorn on her head, while her brothers tried to knock her off her paws to dislodge it. ThunderClan loves these kits, and they won't do anything to hurt them. I always planned on telling them the truth. It's just happening sooner than I thought. By the time they reached the path leading down to the ravine, the kits were dragging their paws with weariness. We're nearly there, little ones, Mapleshade mewed encouragingly. She hoped that she'd be able to settle them in the nursery and give them a feed before Ravenwing came looking for her. Patchkit stumbled on the pebbly slope, so Mapleshade let him lean against her shoulder and took almost all of his weight as they descended to the gorse tunnel. Petalkit let out a huge yawn.
I'm so sleepy.
She murmured.
I'm hungry.
Largekit squeaked.
My belly's rumbling louder than a badger.
They pushed through the gorse tunnel, ducking their heads to keep the sharp twigs out of their eyes. Mapleshade followed, nudging Patchkit in front of her. When she emerged, Largekit and Petalkit had stopped dead at the entrance. Come on, Mapleshade urged, her attention on Patchkit as he swayed on his feet.
I think something's happening,
Petalkit whispered. Mapleshade looked up. The clearing was ringed with cats, all staring at them. Oakstar stood on the high rock, silhouetted against the trees. Ravenwing crouched below him, his gaze fierce. The deputy, Beetail, was next to the medicine cat, his striped coat ruffled as if he'd been interrupted mid-groom. Mapleshade started to tremble. Patchkit pressed himself against her.
What's wrong?
He whimpered. Oh, it's nothing for you to worry about, Mapleshade told him. Go and, stand over there. She pointed with her tail to a clump of bracken at the edge of the clearing. The 3 kits trotted over in silence and huddled together.
Come here, Mapleshade,
Oakstar commanded. On legs that seemed to be made out of stone, Mapleshade walked forward until she was standing in the center of the clearing. What is it, Oakstar? The dark brown Tom twitched the tip of his tail.
Who is the father of your kits?
He asked.
Tell the truth!
Before Mapleshade could speak, there was a flurry of ginger fur beside her. Frecklewish pushed past the cluster of warriors and joined Mapleshade below High Rock. We know it's Birchface, she called up to Oakstar. Father, why are you asking this?
I want Mapleshade to tell us herself,
Oakstar mewed, his voice soft with menace.
She let me believe that my son Birchface was their father. I cannot imagine that one of my warriors would dare to tell such a lie.
Mapleshade shifted her weight onto her hind paws so that she could hold the leader's gaze. Any clan would be proud to have these kits grow up and serve them, she declared.
Even if they knew the kits were half-clan,
Ravenwing meowed.
we deserve to know the truth, Mapleshade. Appledusk is their father, isn't he?
For a moment, the whole forest seemed to hold its breath. Then there was a screech of pure horror, and Frecklewish launched herself at Mapleshade. Is this true? She yelled, clawing at Mapleshade's face. What have you done? Mapleshade stumbled backwards. Stop! She gasped. She tried to raise her front paws to shield herself, but Frecklewish had her pinned down. Suddenly, the weight was lifted from Mapleshade's belly, and she opened her eyes to see the she-cat being hauled away by Bloomheart and Seedpelt. Mapleshade staggered to her paws. Blood pooled in her eye from a torn eyelid, and her cheek stung from a well-aimed blow. All around her, the cats hissed and muttered. Frecklewish shook off the warriors and glared at Mapleshade. You have betrayed my brother's name, she spat. You have betrayed all of us with your lies and your disloyalty. You don't deserve to be called a warrior. And nor do those half-clan creatures. She curled her lip towards the three kids who cowered beneath the ferns. Their father killed Birchface and Flowerpaw. Get them out of here! Mapleshade shook scarlet drops onto the grass. Why does it matter who their father is? She demanded furiously. I have given ThunderClan 3 fine kits. I am a queen. I should be treated with respect. Oh, StarClan knows we need more warriors. And here they are. Have my clanmates gone mad? They would turn on me like this. Oakstar bounded down from the high rock and stood in front of her. His yellow eyes gleamed with hatred, and he thrust his head forward until his breath blew hotly on Mapleshade's muzzle.
Have you forgotten that Appledusk murdered my son and Flowerpaw? Of all the cats, why did you have to choose him? You cannot possibly expect my forgiveness.
He stepped back and raised his head.
You have betrayed the warrior code and lied to your clanmates. We will not raise these kits within the walls of our camp, nor the boundaries of our territory. Take them and leave. You are no longer a warrior of ThunderClan.
Mapleshade stumbled backwards. You can't mean that. These kits belong to ThunderClan. You have to let us stay. Oakstar shook his head.
No, I do not.
He gazed around at the clan.
Ravenwing told me about an omen he received. A mysterious stream of water that washed 3 pieces of reed into his den. Reeds don't belong in our territory, and certainly not in the heart of our camp. These kits will bring nothing but danger.
Get rid of them! Screeched Frecklewish. Drive them out!
Oakstar's right. They don't belong here,
growled Bloomheart. Mapleshade stared at the gray tabby in horror. You were my mentor, Bloomheart. You know I would never betray my clan.
You already have,
he replied gruffly.
I am ashamed of you.
He turned away, and Mapleshade felt her heart break into pieces. I will never forget this, she hissed, slowly turning to glare at each one of her clanmates. You have betrayed me and my kits. You will live to regret this day forever, ThunderClan. And that is a promise. She stalked over to her kits and swept her tail around them. This is no longer our home, she told them. Come. She prodded them back through the gorse tunnel and up the path. Petalkit fell over and grazed her nose on a stone, but she was too tired to protest. She simply picked herself up and stumbled on as if she knew that there was no point in complaining. Mapleshade felt her heart break a little more.
Why don't they like us anymore?
Whimpered Patchkit as they headed into the trees. It had started to rain, and fat drops thudded onto the ferns around them. It's because they're mouse-brained. That blind, And fox-hearted, Mapleshade hissed.
Those are bad words! Large Kit mewed. You're not supposed to say them.
But it's the truth, Mapleshade answered grimly.
What were they saying about our father?
Petal Kit asked.
Don't they like Birchface either?
Mapleshade felt an overwhelming urge to lie down and slip into the darkness of sleep. Oh, I'll tell you everything later, she promised. First, we must get across the river.
We're going swimming again?
Chirped Patch Kit.
But that RiverClan cat said we had to stay away from the water.
Everything is different now, Mapleshade murmured. When they emerged from the shelter of the trees, the rain was pelting so hard that Mapleshade could hardly keep her eyes open.
I don't want to go swimming anymore,
Large Kit moaned.
I want to go home. I wish I was in the nursery.
Petal Kit sniffed.
It's too wet to be outside.
We have no home, Mapleshade snapped. She had to raise her voice over the pounding of raindrops on the shore. Forget about ThunderClan and the nursery. She stared at the river. The tops of the stepping stones were just visible among the wind-stirred waves. We don't have to swim all the way, she told the kits. Do you see those rocks? We just have to swim from one until the next, until we get to the other side.
But then we'll be in RiverClan,
Patch Kit squeaked.
We're not supposed to go there?
Oh, it's all right. Mapleshade mewed, trying to sound calm. Your father will be pleased to see us. Large Kit tipped his head to one side.
I thought our father was dead.
Mapleshade took a deep breath. You remember that nice RiverClan cat who helped Patch Kit today? He is your father, not Birchface. Large Kit wrinkled his nose.
But that doesn't make any sense. Our father can't be from RiverClan. We're ThunderClan cats.
Yes, ThunderClan, but also half RiverClan, she told him. That's why you liked the water so much today. The three kits' eyes stretched wider until they were like moons.
Is that why our clanmates are mad at us?
Asked Petal Kit. Yes, meowed Mapleshade. She felt the hackles rise along her spine. But they are wrong, she growled. They'll change their minds soon. And until then, we'll live in RiverClan. Everything will be okay. She nudged Petal Kit closer to the river. Come on, we need to cross before it gets dark. The little brown kit hung back.
I don't want to,
she wailed.
There's too much water.
Oh, you'll be fine, Mapleshade insisted. She herded Large Kit and Patch Kit alongside their sister. I'll be right behind you.
Patch Kit looked over his shoulder. Promise we'll be okay?
I promise. The Ginger and White Tom stepped bravely into the waves. Almost at once, water washed over his head, but he fought his way up, spluttering. His littermates followed him. Mapleshade watched the three small heads bob to the first stepping stone. They scrambled out and stood belly deep in the water, shivering. Wait for me, Mapleshade called. I'm coming. Gritting her teeth, she waded into the river. The water sucked at her fur, chilling her to the bone. She forced herself to strike off from the shore and to churn her paws, propelling herself towards the stepping stones. I have to do this for my kits, she told herself, hating every moment. Suddenly, there was a roar from somewhere upstream.
Swim faster!
Screeched Petal Kit.
Something's coming!
Mapleshade glanced sideways to see a wall of water bearing down on her, sweeping branches and debris ahead of it. She paddled furiously, but the current was dragging her away from the stones, not towards them. Hold on! She screeched to the kits as the wave crashed over her head. Mapleshade was thrust to the bottom of the river by the force of the flood. Branches thudded against her, and when she opened her eyes, she saw nothing but bubbles and churned up pebbles. With her chest screaming for air, she clawed her way to the surface and burst out, gasping. Her flailing front paws struck something hard. Unsheathing her claws, she managed to haul herself onto the rock. Somehow, she had made it to the first stepping stone. She looked around. The kits had gone. Mapleshade stared into the water in horror. My kits! Where are you? Any hopes that they had struck out for the second stone vanished when she saw three tiny shapes being swept downstream.
Help!
wailed Petalkit before a wave pushed her under. Mapleshade launched herself off the stone and paddled furiously towards her kits. A pale shape bobbed in front of her. She reached out and managed to hook one claw into the sodden fur. It was Patchkit. His eyes were closed. "Wake up!" Mapleshade screeched. You have to swim!" A faint mew came from somewhere beside her. Mapleshade lifted her head and peered through the waves. Large Kit was clinging to a branch that hung into the river. Gripping Patchkit in her jaws, Mapleshade battled her way over to the tree. She tried to boost Patchkit out of the water, but he was too heavy, and he slipped out of her grasp. "No! No!" Mapleshade yelled as he vanished into the black river. Large Kit lost his grip on the branch and splashed into the water beside her. Mapleshade sank her teeth into his scruff, but the pull of the current was too strong. Large Kit was ripped away from her and swept away with just one tiny cry.
Oh, Mapleshade, grab a hold of the branch! There was a frantic shout from the shore, and Mapleshade saw Appledusk wading into the river, his fur fluffed up in alarm. He gestured with his tail to the overhanging tree. Hold on and I'll drag you out! Mapleshade was only dimly aware of hooking her claws into the branch beside her. She felt herself being dragged through the water, and then strong jaws were in her pelt, hauling her onto the stones. Appledusk loomed over her. What in StarClan's name are you doing? Where are the kits? Two more shapes appeared beside him. What is a ThunderClan cat doing in the river? Asked one. Mapleshade recognized the voice of the young Tom, Splashfoot. Is it Mapleshade? Asked his companion. I think so, Eeltail, yelled Splashfoot. He peered closer, his pale gray fur glowing in the faint light. My kids! Mapleshade rasped. Save my kids! Appledusk's face appeared above her, his eyes huge with horror. Are you telling me that the kits are in the river? Mapleshade nodded, too weak to speak. Eeltail was already bounding along the shore. If the kits are in there, they're going to be in big trouble, she called over her shoulder. Splashfoot raced after her. Appledusk crouched beside Mapleshade. I'll find them. I promise, he whispered. Then he raced away from her. Mapleshade closed her eyes. StarClan, help my kits, she prayed. None of this is their fault. Take me if you must, but please, spare them. Mapleshade lay still, feeling the water run off her fur, until she heard paw steps crunching over the stones. She lifted her head and saw Appledusk approaching. In the darkness, she couldn't see his expression. Did you find them? Yes, he meowed. We found them. Mapleshade hauled herself to her paws. Well, where are they? Wordlessly, Appledusk turned and led her downstream. He pushed his way into a dense clump of reeds and beckoned Mapleshade forward with his tail. Eeltail and Splashfoot were standing over three small, dark shapes. Eeltail looked up, her eyes brimming with pity. I'm so sorry, she meowed. We couldn't save them. A ghastly shriek split the air. Mapleshade wondered where the noise was coming from, until she realized that her mouth was wide open. She shut her jaws with a snap and took a step towards her kits. Her legs buckled, and suddenly she was lying beside them, desperately licking each one in turn. Wake up, little ones, she urged. We made it across the river. You're safe now. Their bodies rolled limply under the strokes of her tongue, and three pairs of eyes stayed closed. Mapleshade pressed her muzzle against Patchkit's cold cheek. You promised you would never leave me. You promised you would keep me safe. His voice echoed inside her head. I'm sorry, Mapleshade wailed. I was trying to find us a new home. I didn't know where else to go. Wait, what are you talking about? Appledusk sounded stunned. Do you mean that you deliberately tried to cross the river? In the middle of a flood? Mapleshade twisted around to look at him. ThunderClan threw us out, she explained.
We had nowhere else to go. I won't pretend to know what's going on here, but we need to take these kids to Darkstar, meowed Eeltail. She needs to know about this. For a moment, Appledusk looked as if he was going to disagree. Then, he nodded.
You're right. Come on, we'll take one kid each. Mapleshade, follow us.
The River Clan warriors gently picked up the drenched little shapes and carried them slowly back along the shore. Mapleshade stumbled behind them, too numb to think clearly. Beside them, the river had calmed and lapped at the shore like a cat's tongue, making soft, comforting noises in the still air. Mapleshade waited for Appledusk to send the other warriors on ahead, to find some excuse to be alone with her, so that they could mourn their kids together before facing the rest of his clan. But he didn't turn back to look at her. He hasn't even asked what I named them. The warriors threaded between tall reeds on a narrow path of dense brown soil. It opened into a clearing, which was raised up from the water by heaps of more soil on top of tightly woven branches, like a huge nest. Mapleshade caught the glint of many pairs of eyes watching from amongst the reeds, and her wet fur bristled. An orange she-cat ran up to Appledusk. Mapleshade recognized her at once. It was Reedshine, the warrior who had been fussing over Appledusk at the gathering.
Did someone fall in the river?
Reedshine gasped.
Are you okay?
The River Clan warrior set down Petalkit's body as gently as if she was sleeping, and touched his tail to Reedshine's flank. I'm fine. I need to speak with Darktail. Reedshine stayed where she was, her gaze flicking to Mapleshade and back again. Why is she here? What's going on, Appledusk? There was a stir of movement at the far end of the clearing, and Darkstar stepped out of the reeds. All the cats fell silent. Appledusk stepped forward.
3 kids have drowned in the river,
he announced. Ask me their names. Mapleshade screeched silently. Appledusk looked at his paws.
I am their father.
Mapleshade held her breath. This was Appledusk's chance to plead for mercy on her behalf, to explain that Mapleshade deserved to be given a place in RiverClan because she had borne his kids. Darkstar's eyes narrowed to tiny slits. What do you mean, Appledusk? What are you talking about?
I'm so sorry, Reedshine.
Appledusk whispered. Please forgive me. Reedshine twitched the tip of her tail. Forgive you? For what? Mapleshade looked at the concern in Reedshine's eyes and felt something inside her turn to ice. This was not just a clanmate to Appledusk. Appledusk bowed his head and went on.
Many moons ago, I met with Mapleshade in secret.
There was a gasp from his clanmates, and one of them, a rumpled old tabby, hissed, "Traitor!" Mapleshade kept her gaze fixed on Darkstar. She has to take pity on me. I have lost my home, my kids. I have nothing left except Appledusk. You knew about these kids? Darkstar asked, the tip of her tail twitching. Appledusk nodded, and Reedshine let out a soft wail.
But Mapleshade told me she would raise them in ThunderClan.
Appledusk mewed.
I knew I had made a mistake, so I just said nothing to my clanmates.
A mistake? Mapleshade almost winced at the pain in Appledusk's pale green eyes. Almost, but not quite. The ice was spreading through her faster than a leaf-bare frost. Soon, I won't be able to feel anything, she thought.
I should have never betrayed my clan by meeting with Mapleshade, Appledusk went on, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I can only beg you for your forgiveness.
What brought the kids here tonight? Darkstar queried, looking down at the 3 pitiful shapes. Mapleshade opened her mouth to explain, but Appledusk spoke first.
Mapleshade's clanmates learned the truth, and she had to leave. The river is flooded, and the kits, well, they were too young to swim across.
His voice faltered. Mapleshade stared at him. You're making it sound as if it was my fault. Darkstar mewed.
The loss of any kits is a loss to all of us. But you broke the warrior code, Appledusk. How can I ever trust you again?
Reedshine padded forward until she was standing alongside Appledusk, her fur brushing against his. If I am willing to forgive him for his past mistakes, then so should you, Darkstar. There were murmurs from the cats at the edge of the clearing. They sounded impressed by Reedshine's confidence. Darkstar waited until the clearing was silent again, and then nodded.
This is not the season for losing warriors. Appledusk, I believe you are sorry for what you did, and that you have been punished enough by the death of your kits. I will allow you to remain in RiverClan, but know that I and the rest of our clanmates will be watching you. You will have to earn back our trust.
Appledusk dipped his head so low that his muzzle almost touched the reeds beneath his paws.
I will never forget your mercy, Darkstar, he murmured. Thank you. I promise that my loyalties lie only with RiverClan and my clanmates.
He glanced sideways at Reedshine, who blinked at him. Darkstar gestured with her tail.
Rainfall, help Splashfoot and Eeltail bury these kits. The accident of their birth is not their fault. They may lie in peace in our territory now.
Mapleshade struggled to find her voice.
What about me? She croaked. May I stay here with my kits?
The RiverClan leader stared at her. No, you may not. You will leave this territory at once, and never set foot across the border again. Like Appledusk, I believe the loss of your kits is punishment enough. Otherwise, rest assured, my warriors would have clawed your fur off for what you've done.
Night is falling,
Mapleshade protested.
Where will I go? Appledusk, help me!
The pale brown warrior shook his head.
Why should I? It's your fault that these kits are dead. I never want to see you again.
Reedshine pressed herself even closer to Appledusk's flank. Go away, Mapleshade, she hissed. You've caused enough trouble tonight.
Mapleshade looked down at her drowned kits. I cannot leave them,
she whispered.
They are everything to me.
And now, they're dead, Appledusk growled.
Be thankful that we've shown you some mercy, Mapleshade. Now get out, before we make you leave.
Mapleshade stared at the cat whose face had occupied her mind for so many moons. She thought she had known every swirl of his fur, the angle of every whisker. But now, she didn't recognize him at all. The coldness swelled inside of her until she felt it burst out of her eyes. There was a jolt of satisfaction as Appledusk flinched away from her gaze.
You told me you loved me,
Mapleshade hissed. I went through the agony of bearing your kits, and now you treat me worse than prey. You will regret this, Appledusk, and that is my last promise to you. She turned and stumbled out of the clearing, blindly following paths through the reeds until she reached scent markers that suggested she was out of RiverClan's boundary. She was dimly aware of crossing a hard gray stone. Then a massive shape loomed out of the shadows. A sharp-edged two-legged den of some sort. She found a hole in the wall and slipped through into a musty, hay-scented space. Mapleshade slumped down on a clump of dusty, dried stalks and shut her eyes. Sleep dragged her away, and her dreams were filled with the sight of her kids spiraling away from her in churning black water, screeching for a help that never came. Mapleshade fought her way out of sleep, coughing and scorched with fever. Where am I? She struggled out of her prickly nest and looked around. A fresh killed mouse lay beside her, and Mapleshade's belly rumbled. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. She bent down to take a bite. Then, the memory of where she was and what had happened flooded over her, and she retched violently. My kids! Apple Dusk.
Hello? Are you alright?
An anxious mew made Mapleshade look up. A small black and white Tom was standing at the foot of a huge stack of hay that filled the den. Daylight filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls, highlighting tiny specks of dust that floated in the air. Where am I? Who are you? Mapleshade rasped. The little cat picked up a bundle of dripping moss that lay at his paws and carried it over to her.
You need to drink,
He urged.
My name's Marla, and this is my barn. You went to sleep so quickly last night that I didn't have time to introduce myself. How you feeling?
He peered at her, and Mapleshade shied away.
You still look exhausted,
Myler observed.
Eat the mouse and I'll let you get some more rest.
I'm not staying, Mapleshade hissed. I don't want your fresh kill.
But there's plenty to share.
Myler insisted.
I can catch more for myself. Don't worry.
Mapleshade staggered forward, almost knocking the Tom off his paws. Leave me alone, she growled. I don't need your help. She searched for the gap in the wall she had come in through. Behind her, Myler was meowing something about giving shelter to strangers and having plenty of room in the barn. Mapleshade didn't bother to listen. What could some kitty pet possibly give her? My life is ruined. I did nothing wrong, and yet I have lost everything. The image of her 3 dead kids hovered at the edge of her vision, as if she would be able to see them clearly only if she turned her head fast enough.
Mama, help me!
They wailed. I can't, Mapleshade whispered. Oh, my precious loves. I am so sorry. Trembling with hunger, Mapleshade plunged into the wispy undergrowth that edged RiverClan's territory. She stayed well clear of the border as she headed uphill, toward the gorge. She knew that there was a wooden 2-leg bridge just below the sheer walls of the rock, where she would be able to cross back into ThunderClan territory. She felt an irresistible pull inside of her, back to the place where she had spent her whole life. There was no solace in the spindly willows of RiverClan, and the vast open moor that stretched up above the gorge made her shudder with fear. Instead, she yearned for the denseness of sturdy trees and thick green undergrowth rooting her to the ground, filling her senses with familiar sounds and scents. Mapleshade reached the wooden bridge and raced across, ears flattened and fur spiked. The noise of the river tumbling below dragged her mind back to the moment that she'd let go of Patch Kit. The water, it was too strong. It's not my fault that my kids died, she reminded herself. She jumped off the bridge onto dry, sandy ground that sloped up towards 4 trees directly in front of her. If she turned and followed the river downstream, she would be in ThunderClan territory. Trying to ignore the sounds of the water, she took a few steps towards the boundary, already tasting the scent markers on the still air. Then, she froze. She could not cross the border. She had been driven out, exiled by her own clanmates. If she took one step into her former home, she would be treated worse than a rogue. An image swam into Mapleshade's mind of a small black cat, eyes narrowed with suspicion, spouting words that rang with righteous indignation. Raven Wing. This was all his fault. He had jumped to conclusions, shattered the clan's trust in her, forced her clanmates to judge her for something beyond her control. Because of his actions, Hatch Kit, Large Kit, and Petal Kit had died. Every breath that Ravenwing took was a breath he had denied Mapleshade's kits. Rage swelled inside of Mapleshade's head until the sounds of the forest faded away and her vision blurred. She stumbled along the edge of the border, not caring where her claws scraped on stones or brambles dragged on her pelt. Her skin throbbed with heat, and she was dimly aware of being thirstier than she had ever been in her life. But even when her paws splashed through a tiny stream, she couldn't muster the energy to stop and drink. Eventually, she could walk no farther, and she flopped down where she was, in a narrow ditch beside a holly bush that smelled of home. Mapleshade dropped down the steep slope into the hollow, paused briefly to look up at the 4 gigantic oaks, then carried on, scrambling up the other side and plunging into the trees that bordered WindClan's territory. There was a strong smell of fox, which made her fur prickle, but it was stale rather than fresh, and would hide her own scent from curious border patrols. She felt rather than heard the thrumming of terrified paws over the ground. Peeping out of the bracken, she saw a rabbit hurtling across the moor towards her, pursued by a patrol of WindClan cats. Mapleshade hardly had time to think before the rabbit ran straight into her in a tumble of paws and fur. She bit down hard on its neck and it went limp. The warriors were still racing towards her, so Mapleshade grasped the rabbit in her jaws and hauled it up the nearest tree. Her claws tore on the smooth bark, and the rabbit dragged at her teeth. But at last, she reached the lowest branch and crawled onto it with her fresh kill. She heard the WindClan cats scramble to a halt below.
"Where'd the rabbit go?"
asked one of them. Another was circling the trunk, sniffing the ground. "Oh, well, the trail ends here. But that's impossible. Rabbits don't climb trees."
"I don't know how you can smell anything,"
grumbled an old Tom with patchy brown fur. Mapleshade thought his name was Midgepelt.
"It stinks of fox around here."
Mapleshade held her breath, waiting for one of the cats to look up and see her. There was little leaf cover this far down the trunk, and she couldn't climb higher without making a noise. But the patrol sniffed around for a moment more, and then headed back out to the open moor, grumbling about vanishing prey. Fools, Mapleshade thought as she bit into the rabbit. She spent the night under a clump of ferns a little deeper into the forest. She woke shivering beneath a light coat of frost, missing the warmth of her kits. "Wherever you are, I hope you're warm," she thought through chattering teeth. Her belly was still full from the rabbit, so she headed straight into the open, hoping that it was too early for the WindClan dawn patrol. She had traveled to the Moonstone once before, as an apprentice. Mapleshade remembered her excitement at being inside WindClan's territory with impunity, how she had longed to be seen by a patrol and challenged. But now, she darted from rock to clump of gorse, cursing the lack of cover on the empty moor. At last, she reached the foot of the slope and crouched beside the thunder path. The stench of the monsters caught in her throat and made her eyes water. But there were few of the noisy beasts around this early. She only had to wait a few moments before silence fell heavily in the valley, and she was able to dart across the hard black stone. On the other side, she plunged through the long, soft grass and into a hedge. She recalled passing a 2-leg den with cows and a dark, hay-scented barn, where she and other apprentices had paused to hunt. She decided to stay well and clear this time, in case she ran into any of the other medicine cats traveling early to the Moonstone. After crossing a broad expanse of grass and pushing through another hedge, Mapleshade saw the dark brown tops of some 2-leg dens that looked like a barn. She swerved to the far side of the next stretch of grass and trotted through a row of trees to where the ground started to slope steeply up. Tilting back her head, she stared at the jagged rocks that marked the top of the ridge. The sun was striking them, turning them rosy and warm-looking, but their outlines still looked like teeth against the pale sky. Mapleshade's belly rumbled, and she realized that if she didn't eat now, she would be hungry for the rest of the day up on the hillside. She ducked back under the trees and quickly picked up the scent of a mole snuffling in the sunshine. Not her favorite fresh kill, but too easy to miss. She struck the flattened black body with her front paw and tucked in for a meal. Afterward, she felt stronger, clear-headed. She bounded up the side of the ridge, scattering loose pebbles under her paws. As the weak sun set the jagged stones ablaze, Mapleshade leapt onto a boulder and opened her jaws to screech at the valley below. "I'm ready for you, Ravenwing. You will pay for what you've done." The life that she had known was over. If she couldn't be a warrior, then she would dedicate every beat of her heart to avenging the deaths of her kits. The sun dragged slowly across the sky. Mapleshade's belly was still full. Besides, she was too tense to eat. Her claws were blunt after her long day of walking, so she sharpened them on a stone. A hawk swooped overhead, and Mapleshade imagined it, feasting on Ravenwing's body after she'd finished with him. He would bleed a river of blood, every drop spilled, for her helpless kits. At last, the sky faded, and the shadows between the rocks grew thicker. Mapleshade fluffed up her fur against the chill, and crouched on top of a boulder, watching for any sign of some movement at the foot of the hill. Suddenly, a darker shadow flitted across the grass. Ravenwing was here, alone and early, as he usually was. Mapleshade unsheathed her claws and let them scratch against the stone. She stayed very still, hardly breathing as Ravenwing climbed up the slope towards her. Mapleshade tensed her hindquarters, ready to leap down onto the medicine cat. But then, she paused. If she attacked him out here, she might be seen by the other medicine cats. And where was the satisfaction in a simple ambush? She should follow Ravenwing down to the Moonstone and tackle him there, at the very source of his precious omens. Mapleshade pictured the long, stifling tunnel from her visit as an apprentice. Her pulse prickled at the thought of entering that darkness again. But then, the wails of her kits echoed in her ears, and she slid soundlessly off the boulder, just a heartbeat before Ravenwing padded past. Mapleshade could hear him, breathing heavily after the climb. She waited until he had vanished into the gaping maw of Mothermouth, before slipping out and trotting after him. The hole swallowed her up at once, thick, black shadows pressing around her, until there was no glimpse of moonlight when she looked back at the entrance. Mapleshade padded over the stone floor, trying to keep her paw steps as light as possible. But Ravenwing must have heard something, because he stopped, invisible in the dark ahead of her, and called out, "Who's there?" Mapleshade froze, convinced that her heart was thudding loud enough for the medicine cat to hear. But after a moment, Ravenwing carried on, his paw steps the softest whisper in the silence. Faint gray light appeared ahead, silhouetting the medicine cat's ears. The Moonstone. Mapleshade realized that she dropped into the hunting crouch and was stalking forward one step at a time. Her tail flattened behind her. She reached the opening of the cave and almost gasped out loud at the sight of the Moonstone glittering in the silver light. Ravenwing knelt in front of it, his head bowed. With a hiss, Mapleshade sprang forward, claws extended. She landed on his back, sending him rolling onto the smooth, cold stone. She caught a glimpse of his eyes, bright in the reflected moonlight. "Mapleshade!" Ravenwing choked. "What are you doing here?" Mapleshade let her claws sink into the fur around his throat. "Avenging the death of my kits! If I could kill you 3 times over, I would." She knew she had nothing to say to the medicine cat. Nothing would bring back her kits. He simply did not deserve to live when they were dead. She bit down on Ravenwing's neck, and the black cat went limp beneath her. There was the sound of paw steps approaching down the tunnel. Mapleshade let Ravenwing fall to the floor and slipped behind the crystal. "Great Star Clan!" she heard Larkwing, the Wind Clan medicine cat, hiss. "Ravenwing! Oh, what happened?" A grunt came from the cat peeking around the Moonstone. Mapleshade saw Slowfur, the Shadow Clan medicine cat, sniff at Ravenwing's unmoving body. He's dead," Slowfur announced in horror. He looked around and Mapleshade ducked behind the crystal. We can't leave him here, yelled Larkwing. Come on, help me get him back to the surface. Mapleshade listened to the sound of them dragging Ravenwing up the tunnel. She waited until the rays of the moon had slid past the hole in the roof, and the cave was plunged into darkness. Mapleshade's heart pounded. But, she reminded herself, she had nothing to be afraid of. The only dangerous thing in the shadows was her. She wondered if the medicine cats would continue with their gathering, but they did not come back to the cave. Mapleshade figured that they had returned to their clans to deliver the terrible news. When the tiny patch of sky above the hole turned white with dawn, Mapleshade stretched her cold, stiff legs and padded back up the tunnel. Outside Mothermouth stood a heap of small stones that had not been there before. A tuft of black fur poked through a gap in the pile. Mapleshade sniffed and recognized Ravenwing's scent. Rather than carry him all the way back to the forest, his fellow medicine cats had decided to bury him here, marking his final nest with a careful mountain of rocks. Mapleshade curled her lip. What memorial was there to her kids? Nothing but cold, wet dirt inside RiverClan's territory. She struck out at the pile of stones, knocking them to the ground. Her claws caught on the rocks and her pads stung, but she kept flailing until the heap was destroyed, and Ravenwing's body was exposed to the gray dawn. Mapleshade looked up and caught sight of a hawk circling overhead. Here's your next piece of fresh kill, she thought with satisfaction. The hawk swept closer, and Mapleshade bounded away from the scattered stones. She bounded down the hillside without looking back. She had avenged her kits. Were you watching, my precious kits? I killed him for you. I hope you never see Ravenwing in StarClan. He should be in a place of no stars for all eternity. She reached a hedge at the edge of a stretch of thick, soft grass and crawled under the branches. Suddenly, she was too tired to walk or take another step. Ignoring the rumbling in her belly, she closed her eyes.
Mama, help me!
Two drenched faces appeared in front of Mapleshade, eyes huge and pleading, mouths open in tiny wails. The sound of the river roared in Mapleshade's ears. Patch Kid! Petal Kid! She screeched. She thrashed with her front legs, trying to reach them as the water sucked them away. But her paws thudded against cold, hard earth. Mapleshade opened her eyes. She was lying under the hedge beneath the high stones. Why had she dreamed of her kids? And where was Large Kid?
Mama! Save us!
Two voices echoed again. Mapleshade shook herself and sat up. Ravenwing had died. Did that mean that only one of her kids had been avenged? StarClan, why are you doing this to me? I fell in love, that's all. And now I'm made to suffer more than any cat before. And now I am made to suffer more than any cat has before. An image drifted into her mind of a pale brown cat sitting among the ferns, looking out at a churning black river as it swept three little shapes away. Frecklewish. According to Nettlepaw, she had seen the kids struggling, but had done nothing to save them. They may not have been Frecklewish's kin, but the warrior code said that no kid should be left in danger, regardless of the clan. Frecklewish needed to pay for the lost kits, just as Ravenwing had done. Mapleshade stood up, shaking on exhausted paws. This would be harder to achieve, because Frecklewish only left ThunderClan to go to gatherings, when she would be surrounded by her clanmates. And even inside the border, she was rarely alone. Mapleshade needed to find a way to attack her within the territory, the safest place for a warrior to be. Thinking hard, she started to pad along the bottom of the hedge. A tendril of ivy caught at her foot and almost tripped her. Hissing, Mapleshade snatched her paw away. The ivy lay on the ground, quivering like a glossy green snake. Snake rocks. Mapleshade pictured the nest of adders that had been blocked in with stones. Perhaps there was something deadly inside ThunderClan's borders after all. Mapleshade trekked back to the forest, skirting the edge of WindClan under the cover of darkness and heading for ThunderClan's border with Two Lake Place. She knew she would have to wait for Frecklewish to pass by on patrol. Even then, Mapleshade would need the luck of StarClan to get the she-cat alone. She plunged into the lush green grass at the foot of the two-leg fences, then scrambled up over the wooden barrier, dropping down into the small, strongly scented enclosure on the other side. Almost at once, a fat gray and white Tom heaved himself through a tiny flap in the side of the two-leg den and lumbered towards her, mewling. "Get out of here! You're one of those stinking forest cats, aren't you? My housefolk don't want you in their backyard. Shoo!" Mapleshade waited until the kitty pet was a mouse length away. Then she shot out one paw and raked his face. The kitty pet leapt backwards, screeching. "Ow!" Blood dripped from his blunt muzzle. Mapleshade stayed where she was. The kitty pet glared at her through screwed-up eyes before turning and shuffling back into the den. When the flap banged shut behind his plump haunches, Mapleshade studied the enclosure. A tree grew beside the fence, with broad enough branches to support her, and dense leaves to hide her from view. She would wait there for Frecklewish. She scrambled up the tree and settled on the bough that looked out over the forest. She had caught a squirrel at Four Trees, and drunk from a stream so her belly was comfortably full. Resting her chin on her paws, she let herself doze. One ear pricked for any sounds from below. At dusk, 4 ThunderClan warriors came past, creeping along the bottom of the fence, as if they feared the kitty pets were about to attack. Mapleshade curled her lip in scorn. She had thought her clanmates were braver than that. Frecklewish was not among them, though. As night fell, Mapleshade dropped down from her branch into the long grass, hoping to hunt. ThunderClan's scent surrounded her, and for a moment she felt a pang of longing. Then she pictured her clanmates, driving her and her kits away, and she thought of Frecklewish watching her kits drowned, and her fury returned. She quickly caught a blackbird that was wrestling with a worm and carried it back to the tree. Behind her, the gray and white Tom was bundled out of the den by a cross-sounding two-leg. Mapleshade watched the kitty pet squat on the grass, its eyes huge with fear, then race back inside. He knows this territory is mine now. Mapleshade slept fitfully, the bark digging into her belly fur and sending a damp chill through her bones. She woke with the first glimmer of dawn, feeling pangs of hunger. The blackbird had been old and scrawny. Mapleshade scanned the forest for signs of movement. All was still beneath the trees. She jumped down and padded into the ferns, scanning for prey. A tiny rustle alerted her to a mouse scrabbling at the foot of a sycamore tree. Mapleshade stalked forward, hoping her flashes of white fur wouldn't startle her prey. The mouse was intent on nibbling on a seed, so Mapleshade was able to pounce unseen, killing the creature with a single blow to its neck. Then she froze. She heard voices. Bloomheart was among them, directing his patrol to split up and hunt, before meeting again at the lightning-struck elm. There wasn't enough time to get back to the two-leg fence, so Mapleshade crouched beneath a clump of bracken with her fresh kill. Paw steps came closer. Then, a glimpse of brown fur through the green stems. Frecklewish. StarClan had brought her right to Mapleshade, but she couldn't attack her here, not when the others were so close by. Mapleshade backed carefully out of the bracken, dragging the mouse. Its body was still warm, so the scent it left would seem fresh. Sure enough, she heard Frecklewish sniffing at the air and uttering a low growl that suggested that she had picked up the trail. Mapleshade let the mouse scrape along the ground a little more before daring to pick it up and move forward with it dangling from her jaws. She couldn't risk being seen by Frecklewish before she had reached Snake Rocks. Mapleshade deliberately pushed her way through the thickest undergrowth so that the mouse left a generous trail of scent. She hoped that her own scent would be lost among the general ThunderClan odors. She didn't think that she had been out of the clan long enough to smell unfamiliar. She could only just hear Frecklewish stalking her. The she-cat had been one of the best hunters in the clan, and moved as lightly as a butterfly's wing over the leaf-strewn ground. Suddenly, dark gray stones loomed over the stems of bracken. Mapleshade swerved, still carrying the mouse, which felt heavier and heavier in her jaws. She padded around the base of the rocks and emerged into a clearing on the other side. There was hardly any trace of cat scent. Clearly, the warriors were concerned that the adders might escape from their prison. Mapleshade hoped that the snakes were still there, but there was no time to check. She left the mouse on the ground and raced towards a heap of smaller stones that had been piled in front of the adder's nest. She pushed aside as many as she could, leaving a gaping black hole, then ducked behind a boulder. Frecklewish emerged cautiously from the bushes, her jaws parted to scent the air, and her fur bristling. She looked puzzled when she saw the dead mouse. It was then that Mapleshade sprang out from behind the rock and snarled at her. "You let my kits die!" Frecklewish stumbled backwards in shock. Mapleshade! You shouldn't be here! She arched her back. "Leave, or I'll call the rest of the patrol!" Mapleshade lashed her tail. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a tiny flicker of movement from the pile of stones. Was that a snake slithering into the light? Mapleshade took a step closer to the rocks. "What, are you too scared to fight me yourself, Frecklewish?" she hissed. "No, you prefer watching helpless kids drowned, don't you?" The brown she-cat stiffened. I thought your kids would be saved," she rasped. "I never meant for them to die." Mapleshade sniffed. "I don't believe you. You're a fox-hearted coward. I bet you're glad they're dead." Frecklewish bounded towards Mapleshade, her eyes flashing with anger. "I wish you were dead," she spat. You betrayed my brother's name." Mapleshade dodged sideways just as Frecklewish lunged at her. With a yelp, the she-cat stumbled into the pile of stones. Before she could find her footing, there was a hiss, and a sleek, dark green head darted forward, tongue flicking. "Adder!" gasped Frecklewish. There was a blur of movement, and then Frecklewish staggered backwards, screeching. "Ah! It bit me! Help!" "Oh, like how you helped my kids," Mapleshade growled. "Never. I hope you die in agony." Frecklewish yelled again, a wordless shriek of pain. Almost at once, paw steps thrummed towards them through the trees. "Frecklewish, is that you?" called Bloomheart. Mapleshade slipped into a clump of bracken at the far side of the clearing. She knew she should flee before the patrol arrived, but she wanted to watch Frecklewish die. With a crackling of undergrowth, Bloomheart and two other ThunderClan warriors, Seedpelt and Thrushtalon, burst into the clearing. "Keep watch for snakes," Bloomheart ordered. His clanmates spun around and scanned the rocks. Bloomheart bent over Frecklewish, who was curled on the ground with her paws over her eyes. "It's all right, Frecklewish. We're here now." "My eyes!" wailed Frecklewish. "I can't see!" Bloomheart lifted his head. "Oh, StarClan, if we ever needed Ravenwing, it's now. Why did you take him from us?" Then he shook himself and faced his clanmates. "Seedpelt, we need soaked moss as fast as you can. We have to wash the venom out of her eyes. Thrushtalon, fetch every scrap of fennel that you can find in the medicine stores. We have to try and save Frecklewish's eyesight." The two warriors darted away. Bloomheart placed his paw on Frecklewish's flank. "Lie still," he meowed. "We're doing everything we can." "But ThunderClan doesn't have a medicine cat," Frecklewish whimpered. "Am I going to die?" "Not on my watch," Bloomheart vowed. Mapleshade felt bile rise in her throat as her former mentor soothed the cat who had watched her kits drowned. Frecklewish's eyes were a seeping, clouded mess. Even if she survived, she would never watch anything again. Mapleshade knew that she had to leave before the rest of ThunderClan rushed to help Frecklewish. She crept through the undergrowth to the thickest part of the forest. then raced back to the two-leg fence. Cries of alarm filtered through the trees as more warriors arrived at Snake Rocks. The sounds faded as Mapleshade scrambled over the fence and crouched on the bare brown earth, panting. Only one voice echoed in her ears now. Patch Kid, her tiniest, most defenseless kid.
Help me, Mama.
Her daughter, Petal Kid, had found peace with the attack on Frecklewish. Like with Large Kid, her desperate cries had been silenced. For a moment, Mapleshade's breath was crushed beneath a wave of grief for a son and daughter she might never see again. Then, she clenched her jaw and pictured the final cat who had to suffer for the death of her kits. Not long now, Patch Kid, she vowed. Soon, you will be free. Dusk fell, bringing with it a cold, damp wind. Mapleshade jumped down from the fence in the forest and followed the boundary to the edge of the two-leg place. Raindrops pattered around her as she reached the pine trees, whose spindly trunks and whispering needles gave little shelter. Mapleshade padded softly over the forest floor, staying well outside the ThunderClan border as she skirted the tree-capped place, which was silent and dark now, and plunged back into the dense undergrowth. Brambles scraped her pelt and blocked her way, but Mapleshade kept pushing through, ears pricked for the first sounds of the river. By now, the rain was falling more heavily, rattling the leaves and stalks around Mapleshade's ears. She gasped when she suddenly emerged from a clump of stiff grasses to find herself at the top of a steep bank with the river sliding past, thick, black, and deadly, just a tail length below. She scrambled backwards with a hiss. For a moment, she thought she saw 3 small shapes twisting and tumbling in the water, but it was only a reflection of starlight. Mapleshade stared at the reeds growing on the far shore. Somewhere in there was the RiverClan camp, perched like a bird's nest above the sodden ground. If she strained her ears past the sound of rain, she could almost hear the murmuring of cats as they settled down for the night. Mapleshade pictured Apple Dusk, laying in his den with Reedshine curled beside him, her orange pelt merging with his soft brown fur. The hair rose on Mapleshade's neck and she bared her teeth. Apple Dusk will regret the day he met me. All those times he said he loved me. All the promises that he made. They were nothing but lies. He never wanted my kits, so he let them drown. He could have saved them. I know he could have. Behind her, the sky was lightening above the trees. Dawn was still a while off, but Mapleshade felt more comfortable traveling in darkness. So, instead of giving in to the urge to sleep, she picked her way downstream along the bank. There was a ridge of little stones stretching across the river down here. She had used them to cross to meet Apple Dusk on the other side once. There was no way that Mapleshade was going to swim across the river, but she could wait if she had to. She reached the stones, invisible in the dark, but recognizable by the way the noise of the river changed as it flowed over them. Shuddering, Mapleshade jumped down the bank and waded in. Her belly fur was instantly soaked, and she gasped at the cold. She forced her legs through the current, feeling the water tug against her and splash her flanks. The river was much slower and shallower than it had been when she had tried to cross with her kits. She still hated every paw step, and she hissed with relief when she hauled herself onto the far bank. She lay there for a while, panting, as the water trickled from her fur. It had stopped raining, but the sky was thick with clouds, and the wind was growing stronger, scented with more rain to come. Mapleshade forced herself to stand and to keep going, plunging into the reeds that were stiff and springy, so that they flicked her face and tripped her tired paws. She pushed forward until she detected RiverClan's border marks. Then, she retraced her steps so that she was following the edge of the territory safely out of scent range. Dense reeds gave way to softer undergrowth, dotted with low, slender-branched willow trees. Her belly rumbled, but she didn't dare hunt, in case it alerted the RiverClan cats. Sounds carried too easily on this side of the river. Gradually, the ground became firmer and drier beneath her paws. The air was filled with green, leafy scents rather than the taint of fish. Mapleshade reached a dense stand of trees, leafier and sturdier than the other willows. The territory border was just close enough that she could look down from the branches and watch for passing cats. With a sigh, she recalled just how much time she had spent up a tree recently. Mapleshade clawed her way up the nearest trunk and eased herself onto one of the lower boughs. Without knowing the habits of RiverClan warriors, she hadn't been able to think of a plan to trap Appledusk alone. She would just have to learn what she could from watching. Mapleshade fluffed up her fur against the cold and waited. She was rewarded quite soon by a cluster of paw steps crackling nearer. An early hunting patrol, chattering and crashing through the undergrowth as if they wanted to alert all the prey to their approach. Mapleshade curled her lip, thinking of ThunderClan's stealth. The patrol passed right under her branch without noticing her. Before their noise had faded, more cats approached. The breeze carried a scent that made Mapleshade's nostrils flare. A heartbeat later, the bracken parted to reveal a pale brown cat, broad-shouldered beneath his thick, glossy fur. Appledusk. Once again, StarClan had brought Mapleshade's prey right to her paws. But then, the stalks rustled, and a plump gray apprentice bundled out. He crouched down and leaped forward, stubby front legs outstretched. Appledusk shook his head. "You need more height than that, Perchpaw," he chided. "You must be prepared to fight full-grown warriors when you go into battle." The young cat's blue eyes stretched wide.
I will get taller, won't I?
Appledusk purred. "Of course you will, but you still need to learn how to jump."
Why don't I spring out at you and show you how it's done?
An orange cat slipped into the clearing. Mapleshade's hackles bristled. Can't Reedshine let Appledusk do anything on his own? Appledusk went to meet his clanmate and rubbed his cheek against hers. "Oh, I'm not letting you do anything," he mewed. "Think of our kits." Reedshine glanced at her belly, barely swollen beneath her pelt. "I'm not sick," she protested. "Oh, I know you're not," meowed Appledusk. "But our kits are too precious to risk Perchpaw injuring you by mistake." Mapleshade gripped the branch so tightly that two of her claws snapped off. She barely noticed the jolt of pain. How could Reedshine be expecting his kits already? How many lies has Appledusk told? She bunched her hindquarters beneath her, ready to leap down the moment the Reedshine and Perchpaw left Appledusk alone. The three cats moved off together with Perchpaw earnestly discussing battle tactics. Mapleshade crouched in the tree, seething with rage. A cold, wet figure pressed against her flank, screeching for help. Mapleshade tried to curl her tail around her last remaining kit, but there was nothing but empty air beside her. She was dimly aware of being hungry and thirsty, and exhausted after her trek through the night. But nothing mattered now except taking revenge on the cat who had destroyed her world. She would wait here as long as she had to, for the rest of her life, if it meant that she could finally silence Patch Kit's wails. She must have dozed, because she woke with a start much later, when the air was filled with misty rain, and the ferns were filling up with shadows. Something was approaching through the undergrowth. Mapleshade stiffened, wondering if StarClan would bring Appledusk to her twice in one day. Then, a bundle of fur blundered into the clearing, skidding to the halt at the foot of the tree. "Take that, ThunderClan Mousestung!" Perchpaw squealed, slapping his paw down on a twig. As the twig snapped, he spun around, ears flattened. "Creep up on me, would you? You're as fox-hearted as your clanmate!" He lurched forward and crushed a large clump of moss. Then, he straightened up and looked down at his enemy. "Oops! I should have taken that back to the Elder's Den. Oh, I'll look for some more." He trotted towards Mapleshade's tree, peering at the roots. Mapleshade let go of the branch and plummeted straight down onto the apprentice's back, knocking him to the ground with a "ugh." Before Perchpaw could figure out what was happening, Mapleshade grabbed his scruff in her teeth and hauled him past the tree, across the border. Her eyes bulged with the effort. The fat apprentice weighed more than a badger. Perchpaw yowled and thrashed, but Mapleshade sank her teeth further into his pelt until he stopped struggling. "Who are you? What do you want?" he growled. Mapleshade placed one paw heavily on his shoulders and snarled. "Keep still or I'll rip your throat out." Perchpaw blinked. "I'm a RiverClan warrior. Let me go." "No, you're not," Mapleshade hissed. "You're a stupid apprentice. It's all right. I'm not interested in killing you. I only want you as bait." When Perchpaw tried to speak, she forced his face into the ground, muffling his protests. Then she squatted down, resting most of her bulk onto his haunches, and waited.
Perchpaw? Perchpaw, where are you?
Mapleshade almost purred. A moment later, Appledusk trotted into the clearing, his eyes troubled.
Why can't you do what you're told for once?
He complained, looking around.
If I find out that you've been practicing battle moves instead of collecting moss, you're gonna be in big trouble, Perchpaw.
Mapleshade gripped Perchpaw's neck fur in her teeth, dragged him out from behind the tree. She let the apprentice fall to the ground. Is this what you're looking for, Appledusk?
The warrior stared at her in horror. You were told to leave our territory.
Mapleshade twitched the tip of her tail. And you thought I would? You're more mouse-brained than I thought. You killed our kits. And now, you must pay.
Appledusk bared his teeth. What are you talking about? You killed our kits, making them cross the river. Let Perchpaw go and get out of here before I call a patrol.
Mapleshade jumped over Perchpaw and stood in front of the brown warrior, pelt bristling, paws planted firmly. You can have that useless lump of fur back, she snarled. But you'll have to fight me first. Appledusk took a step back. His eyes clouded and he suddenly looked weary.
Mapleshade, I don't want to fight you,
he meowed. I'm not giving you a choice, Mapleshade hissed. She bunched her hindquarters beneath her and lunged at him.
Appledusk dodged away. Just leave,
he gasped. There was a crackle of stalks behind him, and Reedshine appeared. What's going on? Her gaze fell on Mapleshade. What's she doing here? Half blind with fury, Mapleshade hurled herself at the orange she-cat. You and your kits must die, she screeched. Appledusk is mine! She unsheathed her claws, aiming for Reedshine's face. There was a thud of paws, then silence, and a solid brown shape flashed in front of Mapleshade. Her claws struck home, piercing fur and flesh, and a spurt of blood leapt out at her. With a grunt, Appledusk dropped at her feet, blood pouring from his throat. In the same moment, a heavy weight struck Mapleshade from behind. Perchpaw gripped her with his paws and bit down hard on her neck. Mapleshade staggered forward and almost fell. Perchpaw slid off her back. Mapleshade could feel him trembling against her flank. And then, she realized that she was the one who was shaking. Why? I'm not frightened. He's dead! Reedshine shrieked, crouching beside Appledusk. Her horrified eyes ringed with white. You killed him! Mapleshade tried to step forward, but her legs felt strangely heavy, and her vision was blurred. Is it raining? She wondered. Something hot and wet spilled down her front legs, and there was a dull ache behind her ears. She shook her head, and bright red droplets splattered the ground like tiny fallen leaves. Something small, ginger, and white stirred beside Appledusk's unmoving body.
You killed him, Mama!
Shrilled Patch Kid. His little tail was held high with triumph.
We're all free now.
He started to fade against his father's light brown fur. Mapleshade stumbled towards her son. Wait! She gasped. Don't leave me! Reedshine rose up from behind Appledusk and hissed at Mapleshade. Don't come any closer! What you have done has been more terrible than what any clan cat has done before. But you have not won, Mapleshade. Appledusk will live on in his kits, and in their kits, and in their kits in turn. His spirit will not die. He will be a part of RiverClan forever. Mapleshade swayed, feeling the soil sticky beneath her paws. Then I will watch over all your kin and punish each one for what you did to me. My vengeance is not finished yet. It will never be finished. She lurched towards the bushes behind the willow tree, and she dimly heard Perchpaw start to follow her. But Reedshine called him back. She has done enough harm, Mapleshade heard her mew. Let her crawl away to die alone. Mapleshade forced her way through the undergrowth. She felt no pain, just a strange numbness that seemed to be spreading throughout her body. She reached the edge of the bushes, and the walls of the two-leg den where she had slept on her first night of exile loomed up in front of her. But Mapleshade was too weak to go any further. She slumped to the ground, feeling dirt and tiny stones grind into her blood-soaked fur. She closed her eyes, waiting for the faces of her kids to appear, thanking her for what she had done. But there was nothing behind her eyes except for swirling darkness, battered by an icy wind, and unbroken by even a glimmer of stars. Mapleshade felt the first stirrings of fear. "StarClan, where are you?" she wailed into the endless night. "Where are my kids?" A small, furry face appeared blurrily in front of her eyes. "Hatch Kid?" Mapleshade gasped. She tried to reach out one paw.
It's you!
Exclaimed the cat.
Do you remember me? I'm Myler. We met once before.
Mapleshade felt his nose press along her flank.
You're badly hurt,
meowed the little cat.
You poor thing. Come on, let's get you inside.
With surprising strength, he boosted Mapleshade to her feet, and with his shoulder, he guided her into the two-leg den. Mapleshade collapsed onto a pile of hay. I have lost everything, she thought. What do I have left to live for? There was a bustle of movement beside her, and the black and white cat started dabbing at her fur with a wet piece of moss. Mapleshade was too weary to push him away. She half opened one eye and saw blood flowing freely down her shoulder, pooling beneath her.
Oh, there's too much! Too much!
Fretted Myler. He dabbed more frantically.
Did a clan cat do this to you?
Mapleshade closed her eye again and nodded. The little cat sighed.
Ah, there's no end to their wilderness and thirst for blood,
he murmured.
You should have left when you had the chance.
Leave? How could I ever leave? I swore to avenge the deaths of my kids, and that's what I've done. And yet, that vengeance is not over, because Appledusk will live on in Reedshine's kids. I will never be finished. Myler curled up beside her, hardly flinching as his fur pressed against her bloody body.
I'll stay with you,
he promised.
You're safe now.
Mapleshade unsheathed her scarlet broken claws. Leave me alone, she rasped, forcing herself to lift her head and glare at her companion. I don't need anyone. The black and white cat stood up and looked down on her with sadness in his eyes.
I think you're wrong,
he whispered, but he turned and padded into the hay-scented darkness. For a moment, Mapleshade longed to call him back, but sleep was dragging at her, heavier than stones and stronger than the river. She closed her eyes and watched her mind fill with churning shadows, pierced by shrieks of terror that made her jump. She realized that she could feel the ground beneath her paws, cold and sodden, and stinking like the river. Somehow, she could walk again, strength flowing back into her limbs, and her vision clearing. She emerged into a half-lit clearing, surrounded by gray tree trunks. Although she felt no fear, she was aware of being watched by unseen eyes. Am I dead? She meowed out loud, listening to her voice echo between the trees. Is this StarClan? She looked up, but there were no stars in the thick black sky above her, not even a glimmer of silver beyond the rustling leaves. Instead, what light there was seemed to come from the fleshy fungus growing on the roots of the trees, and from the slimy trunks themselves. Not StarClan, whispered a voice from somewhere behind her. This is the Dark Forest, the place of no stars. We welcome you, Mapleshade. Mapleshade spun around. Who are you? Show yourself! Never, hissed the voice. You have come here to walk alone in your blood-soaked memories. Instead of dread, Mapleshade felt a surge of triumph. If she was here because of what she had endured, then there would be other cats like her. Cats who would understand what she had gone through, who knew what it was like to stand up to their enemies and dole out immeasurable pain. She would find these cats, whatever that voice had told her, and train them to be as strong and fearless as she was. And she would use them to cause more trouble for the clans than warriors could imagine in their worst dreams. Mapleshade had found a place where she truly belonged. From here, she could cause more suffering than she could when she was alive and fighting her battles alone. For all eternity, Appledusk's kin would mourn the day that he had destroyed the life of a ThunderClan warrior. And just as she had promised to Reedshine, Mapleshade's desire for vengeance would never sleep.